Welcome back, Canonites. Halo has always been something of a progressive franchise, all things considered. It represents a future where men and women serve equally in the military, especially by Halo 2, and the Marines, or Army soldiers in the case of Halo Reach, were a fairly diverse lot, ethnically and racially, and that says nothing of the number of women in positions of power in the expanded universe. It's not perfect by any means, but I've always felt Halo had a fairly progressive outlook on the future. With Pride Month wrapping up this week, I thought it would be nice to make a video highlighting Halo's brief history with LGBT+ characters. Obviously, this is going to be discussing a mature topic, and I would like to ask that the comments reflect that. Keep it civil, try to keep it respectful, and if this isn't a topic that interests you or you don't feel you can approach it maturely, that's fine, and I would suggest either closing the video or just avoiding the comments section. Thank you. With that all said, let's dive in. Queer representation is certainly no easy topic to approach, especially in a setting where one's sexuality doesn't often come up. Nevertheless, there are a number of examples of straight relationships in Halo's fiction, some of which lay at the very heart of Halo in various ways. You have Jacob Keyes and Catherine Halsey. Jacob is a starship captain and an important character in Halo CE, and he helped Catherine scout out her initial candidates for the Spartan 2 program. Catherine, of course, is the brilliant mind behind the Spartan 2 program and everything related to it, the very reason the Master Chief exists. And together they are the parents of Commander Miranda Keyes, a prominent character in Halo 2 and 3. Then you have the Didact and the Librarian, one a brilliant leader of the Forerunner military and a powerful Promethean warrior servant, the other the Life Shaper and reason humans are designated as inheritors of the Forerunner legacy. In grand lore, the two of them are among the most important characters in all of Halo. And beyond that, you have Buck and Dare, Jewel and Raya Umdama, Thomas Lasky and Shylar Silva, and even Margaret 053 and Otto 031 from among the Spartan 2s. Don't even get me started on Romeo. I can only imagine how the internet would have reacted had he been gay rather than straight, his behavior otherwise unchanged. In short, there are a lot of heterosexual relationships in Halo at large. Less so in the games, but even they aren't devoid of them. So there's certainly no reason queer relationships can't be present. 2009 saw the release of Halo Evolutions, and with it, the short story Dirt by Tobias Buckle, who had previously authored Halo the Cole Protocol. Dirt saw the first openly queer characters in the form of Felicia Sanderson and Allison Stark. Felicia was an ODST from Harvest and friend to main character Gage Yevgeny. Allison was a pilot in the Colonial Military Authority before that organization was disbanded by the UNSC. Their time with the franchise was brief, both having sadly died during the short story, but it was something of a milestone nonetheless. Both were characters that simply happened to be lesbians. No characters considered it as any kind of odd behavior, the text didn't try to highlight it as anything special. It's pretty much what you'd hope to see in human society after 500 years of advancement. And really what we should expect from writing today. Up to that point, the closest Halo had ever come to any sort of queer representation was the occasional brute shouting in Halo 3 and Halo 3 ODST when the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull was on. A funny joke to be sure, one I laughed at plenty, but a joke at the end of the day. Although, as a bit of a tangent, in more recent years I've enjoyed comparing Gerald Hanai culture to that of ancient Romans, where sexuality was more about dominance and submissives to oversimplify things. Imagine if Gerald Hanai actually approached sexuality in that manner, where things aren't about gay, straight, whatever, but about who was dominant or active and who was submissive or passive in a relationship. I feel like that would fit especially well for the Gerald Hanai. Food for thought if anyone from 343 is listening. And interestingly, in a bit of another tangent, in 2017's Halo Legacy of Onyx, we actually find that Ungoi families are polyamorous, another deviation from what you could call heteronormativity, but this is all a digression. In the years since Dirt, there have been hints at homosexual or atypical relationships in Halo. In Halo Fractures, another collection of short stories, the Ballad of Hamish Beamish implies that Frank O'Connor's Joe character is bisexual. A sexuality that is often overlooked or played off in some way that implies bisexuals haven't made up their minds or are somehow always open to dating men and women at the same time. To quote, "As he chewed the last meat that he might ever enjoy, he thought about girls and he thought about boys." Another story in Fractures, titled Oasis, featured a gay couple that was close to the story's main character. Interestingly, Oasis was also written by Tobias Buckle. In the Forerunner saga, humanity's Lord of Admirals, Forthenko, heavily romanticized his connection with the Didact. One could almost certainly draw connections to gay romance on Forthenko's part, though the way it's described isn't so easily categorized. In the same saga, there's a catalog unit, a type of Forerunner juridical, that had fallen in love with another Forerunner male before he became a catalog unit. It's far more ambiguous than that in the text itself, but I think that the context makes it evident. More recently, in Halo Battleborn, there are hints of potentially homosexual attractions between the main teen characters, though, especially from Saskia towards Evie. Nothing is ever outright stated, and there are plenty of moments of noted hetero attraction, so it may have to wait for the sequel later this year to see if anything blossoms. Point is, at the end of the day, there are a few confirmed lesbian, gay, and bi characters, and plenty of seeds planted for more, and all instances have been implemented quite naturally. They're just people that happen to be queer. A lot of this is in the expanded universe, but one could easily bring this to the games where it fits naturally. In a future like Halo, where race seems to be all but trivial and divides come down to culture and ideology, a male Marine mentioning a husband or boyfriend seems less than out of place and barely distracting, especially when there are already moments when Marines mention girlfriends. It's the perfect sort of method for adding the smallest bit of representation in a way that feels natural. For something a little more substantial though, let's reimagine a moment like the opening to Spartan Ops, in which Spartans DeMarco and Madsen talk about keeping the ladies of Rio de Janeiro safe and secure. Imagine instead if DeMarco had said, "The ladies and gentlemen of Rio de Janeiro, safe and secure." Would it have been so out of place? Would it have been too in your face? I'm sure some people would say yes, but in a game set 500 years in the future, I have trouble seeing a legitimate argument against it. Now, of course, there are more letters to LGBT+, usually only showing up in the expanded LGBT acronyms. Asexual is an orientation that is very rarely discussed or represented, and one that strangely seems right at home in Halo. Every now and then, questions come up about the Master Chief's sexuality, some in jest, some in sincerity, or alongside the larger question of Spartan sexuality as a whole. Anyone who has read Halo: The Fall of Reach or has a passing knowledge of Halo lore is likely familiar to one degree or another with Spartan augmentations. A particular one is brought up in these discussions, the catalytic thyroid implant. Meant to boost the growth of skeletal and muscle tissue, strengthening the bones and increasing reaction time, this implant had 2 documented side effects: extremely rare cases of elephantitis and a repression in the sex drive. Because of this, it's generally assumed that Spartans have no sex drive at all, which very well may be the case for some or even many of them. We do have instances of Spartans showing romantic interest, which I'll note is distinct from sexual interest, but there's also potential sexual interest in certain cases, such as that of Randall Aiken, who had a daughter, or Maria 062, who retired to start a family, and of course the aforementioned Margaret 053 and Otto 031, who fully engaged, let's say. In addition, their peer and teammate Victor 101 had feelings of jealousy over this well into adulthood. In short, there is nothing set in stone one way or another. The repressed sex drive was a potential side effect after all. But when it comes to John 117, the Master Chief, he hasn't shown any sexual interest in the 18 years he's been around. Again, in the settings we generally find him in, it might be hard to find good reasons for him to suddenly start thinking about sexual attraction, but nevertheless, it has never come up, despite characters in similar situations finding themselves some physical comfort. Let us never forget that Halo Contact Harvest ends with Johnson proving he knows what the ladies like. Due to this, the Chief is generally assumed by many fans, myself included, to be asexual. He had shown a small degree of romantic interest of a sort when he was young, promising to marry a girl when he was 6 years old, but I don't know how willing I am to say that that confirms romantic feelings. He was 6, and I don't think many 6-year-olds have a notion of romance, let alone a grasp of what marriage entails. And regardless, as I said before, romantic attraction and sexual attraction are 2 different things. Asexuality is one of those things that can be hard to express, as really it's the absence of something, and absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Still, the asexual label has fit John's behavior and characterization over the years, so for the moment, I like to think it's safe to say that Halo has a fairly solid asexual icon in the Master Chief. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the final letter in the main quartet of LGBT. Trans would be a subject that's much more difficult to approach in a sci-fi shooter, as I don't think you'll generally have troops walking around on the battlefield or even between battles talking about transitioning. From what I understand, that's generally something kept very close to the chest. As such, it wouldn't be the easiest topic to integrate into a typical Halo game. Interestingly though, Halo has explored parallels to transgenderism in its media. A fairly recent one could argue, would be cross-rate mutation within Forerunner society. Rates were generally very strictly enforced, and transitioning from one rate to another wasn't generally favorable, and could even lead to one being disowned by their family. If you've ever listened to stories of coming out as trans or even gay, that should sound fairly familiar. But perhaps a stronger connection would be AI. When an AI is born, they choose their name, not entirely unlike how trans individuals will take on a new name that better suits their identity. Names are everything in society, carrying weight and meaning, both for the individual and how one is perceived by others. In the short story Saint's Testimony, Iona describes as best she can what it was like to choose her name, how, though instantaneous from a human perspective, the moment was a long one for an AI, ponderously as Iona puts it, a moment when an AI blossoms into self. In another instance, we have the recent appearance of 343 Guilty Spark, or Chakas, in Halo Renegades. In this book, the Ancilla is no longer 343 Guilty Spark or Chakas, notably both names chosen for him, the former an identity forced upon him, and after a time, he settles on the name Spark, a name he chooses himself. And deeper still, while Spark is still picking his name and settling in with the crew of the Ace of Spades, Ryan Forge is determined to strip him of any identity, an experience trans people can likely relate to. So in some ways, Halo has started down the road to trans representation, though it's ultimately one that has yet to be traveled extensively. With Halo games being what they are, it seems like a long shot that we would readily find a blatant trans character outside of EU material. At best, I think you could have a trans character whose background is detailed and explored in the books, then appears in the games in some manner. Or the other way around, they appear in the games and then backstory and whatnot is filled in a book. But that's really an outsider's perspective. I'm far from any kind of experience in this area. Although, to the people that are experienced, with how responsive 343 has been of late, there may be no better time than now to offer insight on how a trans person could be done right in a Halo game or the Halo universe at large. Once again, food for thought. Approaching the subject of queer representation is never easy. I can especially attest to that after writing the script. However, it's a fact of reality that queer people exist, and finding ways to represent different kinds of people to more accurately reflect reality makes the world you're representing all the more believable and easier for more people to immerse themselves in. Again, Halo has always been on the progressive side of things, but there's always room to grow, and that's something I think Halo has always done wonderfully. Thank you for watching, and a major thank you to Haruspis and Grizzlie, two amazing community members who helped me write this script. They did fantastic jobs guiding me along, especially in areas where I have little to no experience. A big part of this script was inspired by a blog from Haruspis about YA influences in Halo, so check that out below. Grizzlie also has her own blog where she writes on a number of different subjects, Halo and otherwise. Both are linked below. Once again, thank you both to these amazing people for your help. And again, if you want to comment on this video, please keep it calm, civil, and mature. This has been Halo Canon, and I'll see you next time for the monthly recap. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing, and if you really love me, hit that notification bell and leave a thumbs up. These both really help out the channel. I wouldn't be where I am now without your views and support, so once again, thank you. Keep on being awesome, Canonites.